Howdy, Disco Citizens. I am Julia Marchese.
And I'm Teri Gamble.
So, welcome to Horror X. This is a collaboration between the George A. Romero Foundation and our podcast, Horror Movie Survival Guide.
Yes, Horror X explores the femmes who make fright films fantastigorical and palavers with them about their experiences in film and horror.
And we are so thrilled to sit down today with one of my co-hosts on the Losers Club podcast, Jenn Adams, who she and I have gotten into the nitty-gritty of Stephen King together many times. And she is such a fount of knowledge and a complete delight. And she is a Tomato Meter approved film critic and a member of the Music City Film Critics Association.
Excuse-moi, incredible. But like Julia, Jenn isn't content to host only one podcast. Jenn, holy goodness, she's actually the host of three other podcasts. Check them out. The Lady Killers, a feminine rage podcast, which I adore, dedicated to female identifying killers in horror. Girls on The Boys, all about the show The Boys and Murder Made Fiction, which analyzes fictionalized adaptations of true crime.
And Jenn is also an experienced writer and has written pieces for such iconic sites as Bloody Disgusting, Rue Morgue, Dread Central, and Slash Film, amongst other places. Jenn, welcome to Horror X.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
You're a freaking icon and a legend. I was looking through, I was like, oh, you are like Julia. Like, you all just cannot. You're like, no, I must have all the podcasts, please.
Right. We've got a lot to say, and we must say it on microphones,
Yeah, but people listen. They listen,
They do. That's true. Sometimes it freaks me out, but, that's true.
What do you have crazed fans out there because you're in the genre? What's going on?
I mean, no, I just sometimes, like, Julia has mentioned, oh, Stephen King knows who you are. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You start backtracking and thinking about everything you've ever said. Like,
Got it.
I don't know. Sometimes you feel like when you're podcasting, you're talking to your co-hosts and that's it. And then you realize, oh no, anybody can hear this.
Yeah, no, all the time. I very relate, get into a fugue state, and all of a sudden I'm like, what did we talk about, Julia? What was the, oh God, what did we say in this episode? And then sometimes I'm just like, oh, well, that's what I guess I wanted to go into the universe. Somehow my intention was to say crazy things on the internet. Yay.
Exactly. But Stephen King not only knows you exist, but also knows what you think about his works.
And that's the thing that freaks me out. And, we try to be like lovingly critical. Like, we're not just gonna fluff. Like, we actually have thoughts about Stephen King's work, and with 70 plus novels, not everything is going to be life-changing and fantastic, and so we try to be honest about how we feel about his work. And there are things that I love, there are parts of his writing that have changed my life, but there's also things I don't like. And so I think it is kind of hard to be critical of someone that you love and someone whose writing really means a lot to you. But I also think that's part of the job too. And we wouldn't be doing our best work if we're not mentioning the things that don't work for us.
I think that's why he respects y'all, though. And I think that's why he likes your show.
I think so too. I mean, I don't know. It's still kind of like, I don't know. When he tweeted about listening to us for the first time, we were all like freaking out on our text thread. And it really was like that scene in Stand By Me where we're like, are we going to go see the body? What are we going to do? And so then that was when I started thinking, oh my gosh, what have I said? Which books did I say I liked? What episode did he listen to? But then you kind of have to let that go and just say what you actually think, because I think that's what listeners are looking for too. And listeners don't love everything either. And so sometimes when you say, like with Firestarter, which is a book that I love, and Julia and I have talked about that quite a bit, there are things in that book that don't work for me. And I think when you can put a voice to that, listeners will respect you also, because they believe it when you say the things you do like,
So let's rewind all the way back to Baby Jenn, when you first dip your toe into horror, and how did that begin?
When did you fall in love with horror, Jenn?
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like there are a couple of key moments in my life, and most of them have to do with Stephen King. I remember, like, one of my earliest memories is looking at my dad's bookshelf and seeing the cover of It. And seeing those, like, I thought it was a book about dinosaurs because it's got like those lizard claws through the grain, the grate. I was like, I got to find out. And also I was mesmerized by how thick it was. And I was like, you can read the title sideways on that. That's cool. I got to read this book. And then I remember being at a slumber party and finding VHS copies of Children of the Corn and Pet Sematary. And I could not convince anybody to watch them with me, but I was like, I've got to find out what this is. Like, there's something so evocative about the cover of Children of the Corn, where it's like this cornfield and then like a sickle raising out of it. I was like, what is this? And then on the back of the Pet Cemetery VHS, there's like baby evil Gage, and I was like, what is this? So I don't remember actually watching those movies for the first time, but I remember finding them at the slumber party and thinking, I have to know more about this. So I started reading Stephen King pretty early because my dad had a lot of them. So I would like sneak them into my rooms. I think maybe the first book I read was The Stand, fell in love. It's still my all-time favorite book. But the first short story I think I read was The Mangler, because I was like, well, that title, I got to read that. And I still love it. And so I read a lot of Stephen King, but I was not allowed to watch a lot of horror movies. So I would either watch them at friends' houses or I would watch them. Like I would sneak out of my room in the middle of the night and watch them. And then I have
you're so cute. You're like, I have to have them in
I
the middle
know,
of the night. I must
gotta
forgo
know.
sleep.
Right, which I mean is even scarier too because it's like the entire house is dark and you're like, but I
And they didn't
remember
know you were doing this?
I would set my alarm and I would like go through the it wasn't a TV guide, but it was like the discount version of the TV guide that we
Yeah.
had, and I would like kind of mark things and like, okay, there's something here I can watch, you know. Like Stephen King adaptations, I remember watching Sometimes They Come Back a lot because that was on TNT a lot, and I could like secretly record it and then watch it in the middle of the night. But I was always really afraid of like what I thought of as like real horror movies, which sounds kind of diminishing right now, but Stephen King has this warmth to him in the way he writes. And there's, even though it's terrifying, there's a comfort there. But I was like, slashers, Freddy, Jason, that's too scary for me. They feel like very heartless and like empty. And so I was always really afraid. And then I remember right after I got my driver's license in 96, I went to see Scream. And that was like a big awakening for me. That's when I really fell in love with non-Stephen King horror. And 90s horror is still my favorite genre, or my favorite time period. But I just remember watching this. And it's like you can remember, it's one of those points where it's like everything is different now. Like this is, you can't go back to not having known that this exists. And now I want more. And like, so I was like trying to find as much horror as I could get. And this time I could go to the movies by myself, or I could go, like, I didn't have to convince my parents to drive me and tell them I was going to see something else, when Toy Story, when really I was sneaking in to see Seven, you know?
Right on.
But so, yeah, I just fell in love with 90s horror, and then the rest is history. And I was like, this is going to be the rest of my life. And I'm obsessed. And anyone who, you know, spends a lot of time with me is going to hear about it. So
I love this. So when did you, I guess, transition from just like being obsessed and reading it and sneaking out and videoing at night to like writing or getting more on the criticism side? I'm curious about that journey.
You know what? I kind of backed into it. It kind of found me. I remember watching Sean Burns' The Loved Ones, which is still one of my favorites because it is really disturbing, and there's a fantastic female killer in it. And I was watching it because a podcast I was listening to was covering it. And so I wanted to know. And I tried to talk about it with people because I was like, I've got to share what I think. And nobody I knew had ever heard of the movie. And so I was just like, I have to seek this out. So I started like seeking out people who were into horror. I started reading more of it and realizing that like writing about horror was a thing you could do and a thing that people would read, you know? And then I just happened to go to a youth group reunion actually, and bumped into one of my friends from high school who was really into horror too. And he was like, well, we're actually looking for somebody to start a podcast with. And so we started a podcast, and
I'm putting a pin in this youth group reunion thing.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
but anyway, back to you. I just want to make sure we get back to that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm very curious about that. Okay.
So we started a podcast. That one, I ended up leaving that a couple of years later, but through that I met Michael Rothman on Twitter because we were just tweeting about Breaking Bad or something. And so a lot of it happened over just kind of bumping into people or meeting people in the social media area. And that's how I ended up joining the Losers Club. And then I kind of like got the podcast bug, and I was like, well, I got a lot to say. And then Michael was at the time editing Consequence of Sound. And he said, let me know when you want to start pitching. And I said, what's a pitch? Because I didn't know anything. Like I was a music teacher, you know, I'd never studied any of this. And so I just started like writing stuff, and it was a lot of it was about Stephen King, and then kind of the rest is history. It's just kind of, I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic, and I was like, well, I just kind of did the next thing and did the next thing and did the next thing, and now I'm here doing a billion things.
What was that original podcast that you did about?
It was called The Horror Virgin.
Okay. And what were you, the virgin?
Okay, with the
I was
youth
not the
person?
virgin.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is okay, the layers of this.
It's a long and winding road. Yes, Clint.
Yeah.
Clint was my brother's really good friend. And he was about a year or two younger than me, but we had dated a little bit.
Okay.
And
You don't
so
have to get
then
into crazy details if you don't need to. I
We
just
won't.
okay.
Oh, I
Well-
like the details. Give them.
Well, but it's like we had just and it was a time in my life when I was looking for something to do too, and so we went to this youth group reunion and walked out to the parking lot with Clint, my brother, and me, and Clint and I were just talking for 2 hours about horror movies in this parking
Wow.
lot, and my brother just kept being like, all right, guys, you all ready to go? Because my brother is not super into it. And so then he texted me about a week later, and he's like, we're looking for somebody. I was not the horror virgin. I was, was well versed. I think it was because I made a connection to Terminator 3 at some point that he was like, okay, she's somebody that can talk about this stuff,
Yes.
Prove the metal. You're like, hey,
Exactly.
I'm
You didn't know
experienced.
it was an audition on an impromptu audition all of a sudden on the side of the road. That's how it
It
goes
might have
sometimes,
been.
right?
Yeah.
That is so wild. Okay, so was that reason why you weren't allowed to watch a lot of horror stuff as a child? Was it the religious aspect, or like what was it that kept your parents from letting you watch it?
Kind of. Like, I did grow up going to church a lot, and like I was really, really into my youth group. And my mom is pretty religious. My dad was a big Stephen King reader.
Okay.
But yeah, I think they just thought it was too mature for me. They weren't super strict, but I was also kind of a fraidy cat. Like, I remember the first horror movie I ever saw was Fright Night, which is still one of my favorites because it's
yes.
incredible. Okay,
Yes.
funny story about this too. The first time I ever heard Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer was right after Fright Night had ended, and my friend had muted the movie and turned the radio on, and I thought that Living on a Prayer was the end credits of Fright Night. And so like that song has always been like it always feels kind of spooky to me now, because I was like, well, it's about going down into a cellar and trying to fight vampires, right?
Well,
like
that intro kind
really-
of has that has a little kind of like I could see that. That's pretty
Exactly.
funny.
That makes me like that song better, honestly. If I
Yeah,
could get it in that
same.
context.
Yeah,
Same.
okay. Listen to it through the lens of Fright Night and be like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe there are some
No, I'm
parallels.
sold. I'm sold. That's infinitely better.
Yeah.
And when you saw that Fright Night for the first time, how did you feel about the nightclub dance number?
Okay, had a huge crush on William Ragsdale for
Yes, he's
years. I was like,
adorable.
Charlie is the cute one. I think it was because I was too young to understand Jerry Dandridge and the hotness of the sweater. And I still love William Ragsdale in this, but
Yeah.
I think,
I
now
I think Fright Night 2 doesn't get a lot of love. I think Fright Night 2 is fun.
exactly. Well,
I
that's
love
my
Fright
face
Night
on social
too.
media too.
I know it
It's
is.
from the poster. Yeah, I love Fright Night too. I mean, there's the lady vampire,
And we
Correct.
got like werewolves bowling to Wilson Pickett and stuff.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
Sean Grimes. What
Delightful.
more do you
It's
need?
delightful.
Well, what's funny is I watched Fright Night at my friend's house because my friend had older siblings and I'm the oldest. So like if I wasn't seeking it out, nobody else was. But like I thought that movie was serious. Like it wasn't until I was an adult that I was like, oh, this is a horror comedy. Oh, this is playing with things. And now I watch it through a completely different lens. But then I was like, this is terrifying. Like these are vampire rules, like the stabbing the pencil through the hand and him like emerging from the closet. Like, so I was terrified and I had a hard time sleeping. And I think my parents were kind of mad that I had watched it. So they didn't let me watch a lot of stuff. I think they thought like if it was rated R, I wasn't going to be able to watch it. And it wasn't so much about being religious. It was just like, this is not for kids. I could watch Poltergeist though, because Poltergeist was PG-13. So
No,
For the
straight up
kids.
PG. Straight up
PG.
PG.
Oh, that's right. It is
Yeah.
PG.
It's before PG-13. And
That's
you watch
right.
that movie
Yeah.
and you're like, that is not a PG movie. Get out of
I
here.
know. I
Yeah.
love
Steven
telling
Spielberg.
people that it's PG too.
Guy's face rips off. Anyway.
Exactly. It's so scary.
Well, so that terrified you as a child. So now, Jen, adult, what is the most scary movie to you now?
Oh goodness, the scariest movie. Well, I've been really into French Extremity recently. Like
Oh,
that
really?
is, yes, that is
Talk to us.
That is some
okay.
scary stuff. I was like, "What's scary? What's
Exactly. I
like?"
don't know. And I think there are different levels of scary. Like on the Horror Virgin, we would always end the episode by doing a scary scale. And like our 1 was Ghostbusters and our 10 was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I think like
Fair.
I've come like after just a long time of trying to rate things and trying to find like and trying to recommend Stephen King for people, because I've made the mistake of recommending Pet Cemetery to people that don't like horror, and like this was way too scary for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe that a scariest movie exists, because I think there are so many different levels of scariness. And a lot of times we're talking more about intensity than we are actual scares. Like the scariest movie, I think, might be something like Sinister or like The Woman in Black, because there are so many jump scares that are really effective. The atmosphere is really uncomfortable. But then something like Inside or Martyrs, that is, I think, the thing that scares me the most right now, partly because I have a huge, like, I used to have a big scar phobia. So like things with skinlessness or like
Oh, yeah.
incisions or something like that, that would really, really bother me. And I couldn't watch them for a long time. And then
You're like a no medical kind of, yeah.
yeah, I don't want to watch Human Centipede. There are
No.
probably a lot of reasons, but I just don't want to see scars ripped apart, like that really freaks me out. So I think that is the element that scares me the most, but it's just, I don't know, something about French Extremity is like there's cruelty that we're exploring, and we're exploring the impact of violence and how violence can be transformative, and can we rise above it, and what is the body, and what does pain actually do? Can pain ever be transformative? And so I find that really interesting. And I also find that the intensity there is, it will rip me out of anything else that I'm feeling. Like I call them punch me in the face movies. Like I want to watch a movie that like,
That's what those are.
yeah, that'll knock me out of anything else I'm stressed out about,
Have
You
you
can't
seen,
think about anything else.
have you seen Frontiers?
I have not seen Frontiers. That has been on my list for a while, and I just as soon as
feel
I
like
see
that
it,
one's also very topical for right now.
I'd say
that's
so.
what I've heard.
Yeah. Frontiers is my favorite of that genre. I like High Tension as well. It doesn't get
I
a
like
lot
High
of play.
Tension also, and I like Aha as well. Like Crawl is fantastic. His Hills Have Eyes remake, I think I really enjoy. Even though there are some scenes in that one that really freak me out too, just in the trailer. But yeah, I've been wanting to watch Frontiers. French Extremity is sometimes hard to find. Like I just watched Eels or Them because it was finally on Shudder again, and then Irreversible, which I also love, even though that is a really, really hard watch, is now on Shudder. So as soon as I see it, I push play immediately. But Frontiers just hasn't crossed my path recently. So
it'll be there. Yeah.
Let us know.
It will. Yeah.
And then you can listen to the Horror Movies Forever Guide episode on Frontiers, and then you can know everything we thought about that movie.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about the Losers Club podcast, but let's talk about your other podcast. Let's talk about how did the Later Killers come about?
I love this concept also, by the way. Like,
thank you.
Yeah. Feminine rage.
Yes.
Like,
exactly.
I'll take it.
And like I've always loved female villains. I think it's so interesting. I think it was, I don't know, this concept may have kind of formally awakened in me with something like Wicked, and I'm talking about the musical. Like I remember when I was in college, I would get drunk and smoke cigarettes on my floor while I was listening to the soundtrack of Wicked by myself and just like cry, But this idea.
Excellent. Yes.
Oh my gosh. I called it
very relate. It's okay.
It was going on a date with my iTunes, which is like the saddest. But
no,
sometimes
that's what you need, honey. That's why we love art. Like clearly that's why we like literally do podcasts and talk about it. It makes us feel things. So yes, as you were. Yes.
Well, and I mean, I could talk about Wicked till the end of time because I really love that. And I kind of took it as like a personal mission statement, especially like, well, if I'm flying solo, then I'm flying free, then like if I get to be, if you think I'm evil, you think I'm bad, as a person who grew up liking horror movies in the South where not a lot of girls like that kind of stuff, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to like what I like. And I'm, if you think I'm bad or if you think I'm evil, fine. Then I'll just be Elphaba and I'll be super cool. And so then I started really like being drawn to female killers. I also have always, I said I love 90s horror, but I've also love the movie Urban Legend, because
Okay.
which is one of the greatest female killers of all time. I think I love her so much. And so I've just always been interested in female killers and was looking to start something. And I was like, well, what do I want to talk about? And of course, it's female villains in horror. And I looked around and not a lot of people are doing that, at least not in the podcast realm, which was like, okay, well, there's an opening here. And I think it's something I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think it's something we need right now. Like, we need to be able to talk about women or female identifying characters as human beings, because we are not all perfect. We are not all virtuous. We're not all like sugar and spice and everything nice, because we're humans, and nobody should be held to that standard. And so I really have loved exploring female villains in the horror world and outside, like Mean Girls, are their villains. And, our running joke is that at some point we're going to cover Titanic, because like, could he have fit on the door? Did she actually kill him?
He could have fit on a damn door.
Right.
She killed him. She was like, I can't have him anyway, because when we get back, he has no money.
Exactly.
Anyway, I love that so much, but I also love the lens of hearing you talk about because of Alphaba too, and how like, the perspective of, was she maligned? Like, what made her actually, is she really evil, or is it just perspective?
Right.
I think we can often look at that with all these people, where we can justify like why people did the bad thing they did, right?
Absolutely.
Where they push to it. I love that.
Yeah.
So who are some of your favorite female
Lady killers?
killers?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, Brenda from Urban Legend, she may be my number one favorite.
Okay. Let me talk. I only saw Urban Legend once. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I was like, "Huh, okay." And the thing I remember thinking was, she couldn't have done that.
No, absolutely
She's
not.
like
Look,
this big. It's the same with High Tension, though. I'm like, she's this
exactly,
big. There's
yeah.
no way she did those things, but that's
Look,
okay. We're gonna let it go.
It's one of those things where, yes, I completely agree with you. And I saw this in theaters and fell in love with it, because I just am obsessed with Urban Legends. And so that carries me through a lot of the logical fallacies in that movie.
I'll
because
have to watch it again, because I remember being not impressed, but I could give it another whirl.
I love it so much.
Okay, if you love it, there's something.
Oh my
to love,
God,
right?
it's it's my ride or die. I think it's so good.
We talk about all the time, like this, like there's everybody, like there's one movie like that everybody like, like,
yeah, that's your movie, and
your
will defend
movie
it until
that no one else gets, and no one
Exactly.
understands why it's your thing.
Yes.
You're like, no, but it's the best thing I've ever seen, and it's because it was made for you, and you didn't know that thing was actually made for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, okay. And her villain monologue at the end, she uses a projector. Like, she has planned for this. Her hair gets curlier and her eyeliner smears more as she gets more villainous. So it's like this ultimate like glam villain moment too. And it's my 90s horror sweet spot. Joshua Jackson is in that movie, and he's a dream crush, of course. So yeah, she is one of my favorites. I also love Julia from Hellraiser. And the woman from Inside, or La Femme, because I could talk for a million years about that movie, and how, like, as someone who's given birth or had traumatic birth like that, I feel really seen by both of the characters in that movie. I'm trying to think who else some of my favorite female villains are. Oh, the Witch. I love that one.
Yes, please.
And it's, I don't know.
Hot.
Is she a villain though?
Well, I think there are a lot of different like levels of villainy with all of the female characters in this movie. And that's part of what I really love about it, is there's a lot to tease out, because Thomason, maybe not, but depending on your perspective, by the end, maybe. Her mother, maybe not. And then the witch is like a straightforward witch in that, which is really nice. I love, I could talk about witches for a million years too, but like,
yes, please.
I love that this witch is just evil. She's just bad here. But why? And what has she been like? If we look at Thomason as the origin story of a witch, like, can we call her a villain if she had to go through everything Thomason goes through? So it's really interesting. And that's like another one that I love is The Ring, which I think we think about Samara, but there are 3 lady killers in that movie, arguably, but they all have different motives, and they all have different levels of likability. And that's what I think is so interesting about female villains, or I keep wanting to say female killers, but like villains, because sometimes they don't kill, or they cause a death, or they instigate things.
Or
And
they're
so
just blamed for it.
exactly. Yeah. And so sometimes like we talk about possession movies sometimes too. It's like in The Exorcist, like Reagan herself is not a villain, but the villain is manifesting inside a female body. And so does that change the way we receive this villain, you know? So it's
Mhm.
really interesting because we're playing with what women and girls are supposed to be, what we've been trained to see them as, and how we've been trained to vilify them. And is that ever warranted? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. So it's really fun to explore.
We just covered on a horror movie survival guide, Haxan. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a
Yeah.
silent movie about witchcraft and like the history of witchcraft, which is really, really interesting and talks. I think you would really like it. In
Yeah.
particular, really talks about what witchcraft was really about, what like
Mhm.
witch trials are really about. Like it's not
Yeah.
really about witchcraft, is it? It's just about saying,
No, it's about vilifying women, you
Yeah,
know?
Just
so
like
let's
she looks weird.
kill her.
She walks kind of
Exactly.
funny. Witch.
Yeah. Or her husband died, you know,
Yeah,
and she
she
still
killed
dares
him.
to be alive, you
She
know?
definitely
So
killed him. Yeah, and they're like, we
Mhm.
don't want to take care of her. It's the onus on society to extract and get rid of the undesirables.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting on, Murder Made Fiction, we are about to cover Elizabeth Bathory or
Oh,
Elizabeth Bathory, which is such
yes.
an interesting story. So I just did a whole
Yeah.
bunch of research on her, and there are elements of witchcraft in her story.
Hmm.
And there's conspiracy, and also she may have been a serial killer. So it's this really
And
interesting
also people say that all of it's untrue and like it's like a whole wives' tale
well,
too,
that's
like
the thing.
depending
Well,
who you
she
talk
did not
to.
actually bathe in blood. I think that
Right.
is not true. But I do think that she tortured and killed her servants. But were men torturing and killing their servants at the time too? And do we care about it more because she was a woman that had power without the protection of a man? So it's really interesting to piece all of that apart and to kind of look at our motivations and why are we so threatened by women with power. You know, that's why I love Hellraiser so much, because you see Julia kind of go through that transition where she's like, am I allowed to be powerful? Can I be scary? And then she starts to really love it, you know?
Hmm.
Like I'm thinking about that scene when he's watching the boxing match and she's like, yeah, I killed those guys, yeah, and I'm gonna kill more, you know.
That was the Hellraiser was the first horror movie I showed to Terry.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And
I
I
love
was
it.
really afraid it was going to kind of break her because it's pretty hardcore. But
It is pretty
Terry,
hardcore.
she saw as soon as Uncle Frank opened that door, she went, "Oh hi!" I was
No,
like,
I just was
Oh,
like, I
yes.
didn't know it was gonna be so sexy. And then I was like, oh, I
"Yeah,
get why all you weirdos love this movie.
Mm.
And then, like all my friends who were into goth industrial shit. And I was like, oh, you guys are just kinky weirdos. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Done.
Oh
Done.
my gosh, yes, but
I too relate.
Pinhead, whew,
Yeah.
I just love him so much.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen Hellraiser 2?
Yes, I have seen Hellraiser
Yes, which
too.
I love, and then the rest of them, I watched the whole thing. Like, there's some peaks and valleys through
There's
there. It's kinda
yes.
it's kinda like the Texas
Not all
Chainsaw Massacre
even. Not all
franchise.
even. Yes, not all even,
Mhm,
but
but the
still
highs are high.
delightful. The highs are very, very high, and it's
Yeah,
still delightful to see um I don't know what was pushing the limits at different points in time too.
yeah,
I feel
mhm,
like I keep saying this is my trope this year, but history is excavate. Horror is history, excavation of history,
yeah,
because it's just constantly like you're looking at that time and that place. This is what was scaring people right here and right now. And
yes,
I
it's
I
so
love stuff from
fascinating.
different eras because I've been just going down like I've been watching a lot of stuff from like the 1930s, 1940s, no reasons.
Oh, mhm.
But like and like what's scary to people and what were
Mhm,
people doing, what's reactions, and so I find that really fascinating.
yeah.
But yeah,
well, you
sweet.
made a nice segue for us, because you already mentioned Murder Made Fiction, which is another one of
Oh,
your
yeah.
podcasts. So let's talk about
Let's talk about
that.
that. Yeah.
Well, this was actually my co-host Joe Lipsett's idea, and so he was kind of the instigator of this, but we've been working together for a while. We have another kind of sideshow called White Ladies in Crisis that started covering physical, the show Physical, which I would love people to watch because it's so good. And then kind of spawned into a erotic thriller like kind of focus show, although now we're talking about Mommy Dearest and Flowers in the Attic, so like that kind of vibe, you know.
Uh-huh.
And he pitched me this idea of looking at true crime adaptations and kind of looking at how we're telling true crime stories, and when we fictionalize these things, what do we pull out? What do we change? And it's something like I've had a real journey with true crime. I was obsessed with it for a while. I listened to My Favorite Murder. I was really, really into it when I was getting divorced. I would listen to I would watch Forensic Files to fall asleep. So I was like, well, at least I'm not dead, um, but, but I got really into it. And then I kind of burned myself out. I think I got over into the exploitative side. There was one podcast I listened to that I won't name because it is what turned me off, but it told a story in a really exploitative way. And I was like, these are real people, and how are we telling these stories? And if I were to die, how would I want my story told? Like I always say, my nightmare is somebody telling the story of my murder while they're like doing their makeup, because it just feels like such a strange juxtaposition. And so I didn't watch or consume true crime for a long time. And then I kind of started to come back to it. It was the Zac Efron, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Cruel and Vile movie about Ted Bundy. I probably got that title wrong because it's way too long, but that's another story. And so I was starting to kind of re-enter that world, but really with a really critical lens. And like, if this were me, how would I want my story told? And would I want my story told? And that's what Joe wanted to explore too. It's like, are we changing the names? Why are we changing the names? Are we recreating crime scenes? What are we showing? What are we leaving out? Are we glamorizing serial killers? Like one of the first things we watched was Ryan Murphy's Dahmer, and just kind of looking at how we're treating this person and what is the lens through which we're telling the story. And I think that got like, it was pretty maligned at the time, even though here's the thing I think is interesting. Everybody was watching that, but a lot of us didn't feel like we could talk about the fact that we were watching it because we didn't want to.
Because the family was so pissed. I mean, it was. They were really upset about it. They had not given permission for him to tell the story.
Right.
So again, it's all the questions you're talking about. It's like,
right.
Are we in this? How exploited? Is it? Who gets to have onus and tell their story? Who gets, the money from these stories?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so he's going to go make a gajillion dollars because he has like this bajillion dollar deal, with this network to make these things. It's really interesting. What I want to know is if you've done like any like Meredith Baxter Burney, like, 90s, because she played everybody back in the day.
Baxter Burney. I know that name.
She's the mom from Family Ties.
That's right.
So she was a TV mom, but her career, like kind of post Family Ties, was just every single true crime story for like 10 years. She played the lady. And so anyway, if you ever need to go into, I think like a lot of them are on Tubi now and stuff like that too.
Sweet.
But you can go in. I'd be very curious to see, because just again, me pulling the old things, I was like, I want to know what's changed. I feel like the way true crime is covered now is vastly different from how it was like pulled from the headlines then.
Yeah,
I don't know. Too. News has always been exploitative, right? And it's always been about the blood, and that's what sells.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like because we've watched, especially when we covered Ted Bundy, like we watched several different things over the course of like decades, and so to watch and I think if we also think about like Ed Gein, which inspired Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho and Silence of the Lambs. And like a bunch of other stuff. Like, I do think you can tell a difference now. Like we are, I think, thinking more about the victims and the impact of telling these stories. And I think you can even tell a difference from like 5 years ago, like it's happened. I think a lot of it is because of the proliferation of podcasting and just the true crime genre. And, we're not doing the police worship like we used to do, like, why can't they solve this murder, or the cops are our heroes. I think we're just looking at it in a different way. But it is interesting to see, like, even 10 years ago, we were like telling some of these really upsetting, like, violence against women murders in more of a salacious way. And so I think we have started to
all the Lifetime movies.
Exactly. We did cover a Lifetime movie. We covered The Capture of the Green River Killer. That's the only one we've done so far. But I mean, we could do a whole podcast on Rip from the
just
Headlines.
That.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because what's the target audience there, and what are you tuning into this story for? I just said I watched Forensic Files when I was really
women going through hard times.
Exactly. I just want to feel like I
You're
want
gonna
to
be
feel
okay.
something.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I think that it's the same thing that, Terry and I have watched all these horror movies because the idea behind our horror movie survival guide is if we watch enough of these movies, we learn how to survive and be the final girl.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
feel like listening to true crime is the same thing. It's just in real
Mhm.
life, right? Like this
Yeah.
is what happened to these people in real life who got taken and got killed. Like now that can happen and like log it in the
Mhm.
book to survival tips.
Yeah. And I also think like I know it can happen. And to a certain extent, like if you're growing up as a woman in this world, you always know that violence like that can happen. But I think other people see it now too, and they say, okay, like it helps us explain why we don't always feel safe just walking, because we can draw really clear lines to like the lady who lit up a room. And then, if we're saying our husband makes us uncomfortable, like listen to us, because then 5 episodes later we're dead in a barrel somewhere. So I think it's helped to kind of shine a light on violence. Now the other issue is who are the victims that we value too, which is a huge problem with true crime that I think we're starting, like there's missing white woman syndrome thing that I think is also something we're starting to look at differently, and we're starting to prioritize different victims, which is another reason that this Ryan Murphy's Dahmer was interesting. Like the way because a lot of his victims were
Black
young
gay
men of
men.
color. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these are not communities that we are told to prioritize. And
Right.
that's why he was allowed to kill for so long. So I think, I agree that the family members, like they did not deserve to see their most painful moments literally recreated. But I also think there's a lot of value in telling that story now, considering who we see as worth saving, in society, and how can we shift that narrative. So it's a mixed bag. And I don't necessarily think there's always a right or wrong answer. What I'm finding through looking at all of this is that every story is different, and you really have to look at your purpose. Like, why are we telling the story of the worst moment of somebody's life? What can we learn from it? And are we learning that at someone else's expense?
So talk to us about your how did the Girls on the Boys start? And are there any other podcasts that we missed? Because
Oh,
I feel like you're on more and we don't.
well, the Girls on the Boys and White Ladies in Crisis are actually part of the Anatomy of a Scream Pod Squad. So if you follow that feed, you'll get all of it, and you'll get a lot of other really fun shows that I'm not really a part of, but occasionally am on. But the Girls on the Boys, I just loved The Boys, the Amazon Prime show. I don't know if y'all have watched it, but
Incredible. It's not a Julia Zeitgeist kind of thing because it's more of a superhero thing, but it's a
it
spoof
is.
on and like play on superhero stuff. But it's
Yeah,
fucking brilliant.
it's so
Absolutely
good.
brilliant. It
Yes.
is scary good.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So that was inspired by that show. I
It
love this.
was. Yeah, I I don't know, I kind of joke like I had kids when the DCU universe was expanding, and I just kind of say I was like on Mount Baby, and then I came down and I realized there were like 20 of these movies that I had to catch up on. So I've never been much of a superhero person. Like I don't know, I liked X-Men, and I just couldn't keep up with the world. I'm not a
You're
comic book
correct.
person.
Those are correct.
Thank
That's
you.
fine.
Right? But
Those are
then
great. X-Men's the shit. I get it. Yeah, that's great.
X-Men is so cool. Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's so many there are a lot of also like
Mhm.
ex-ladies too.
Correct.
But I started watching The Boys, and I was like, this is incredible. What if
Mhm.
Superman was evil? Like and then it's so funny. Like I'm an apologist for the deep, even though he is awful, but he is so funny. And I love the way that we are playing with this character. Like I think um Eric Kripke, who's the showrunner, like has such a sharp sense of satire. And so I really wanted to talk about this. And so I had caught up through season 3, and Rachel Reeves, who is a co-host on the Losers Club, she hadn't seen any of it. And so we did an episode by episode coverage until we finally caught up. And then we were like, well, let's talk about masculinity a little bit. So after every season, we watched a Superman movie, like going all the way back to the original.
Yes.
We actually earlier tonight we just finished recording on Man of Steel because we've completed our Superman universe, which was interesting, and also
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Okay,
it
okay.
is kind of a mixed bag, but I can tell you my thoughts on Henry Cavill as Superman, and that is, I need to.
He's a good-looking man. I liked watching him build computers during the pandemic. Ain't gonna lie. I was like, all right. He's gonna nerd out a little bit. Okay.
Take your shirt off. I'm
I'll let
okay
you build
with that.
things.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Just. Sorry, I'm gonna control my thirst.
Please don't. Never around us. We encourage it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, Julia, I know you and I have been very thirsty on some episodes together.
Kind of our brand. It's okay.
Hey, and you know what? We should be able to be thirsty, right?
Yes.
Like that's feminism too. But we did a series on Charles Bronson also because Rachel is a big fan of Charles Bronson, and I'd never seen. I joke, I'd never seen him talking or moving. I'd only seen him in pictures. So we watched Death Wish, and we watched The Machinist or The Mechanic. I always get it's The Mechanic.
Yeah,
and
and
that was really interesting too. So I think we're waiting for the boys and Gen V to show back up. And then we might like talk about boy movies, like the Fast and the Furious franchise.
Oh, yes.
And like,
get into it.
Yeah. And I'd always really liked like I grew up loving Arnold Schwarzenegger because I think Terminator 2 is the greatest movie of all time.
Correct.
Yes, it's so good.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I'm really like, it's so funny because it's like the polar opposite of the lady killers. It's like, what is masculinity in movies or shows, and how are we playing with that?
The polar opposite, but it's also the same it's the same conversation though. It's like, what is, society saying is what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Exactly.
What's up with that? I think it's brilliant. I love that. And especially Fast and Furious. I don't know. I've just been very curious, not just about that franchise, but I felt like that's come up a few times this last week, just in the zeitgeist, just looking at male friendships, because we're trying to, figure out how the heck we've gotten to where we're at here in America right now. And it's like, what happened? Like, these guys don't have friends anymore. It's like, oh, like, when did that unravel? But I feel like I'm like, let's go back to like, the OG Paul Walker, freaking Vin Diesel, like being in love with each other.
Yes.
Like, it's okay, you guys can love each other again and work on cars. Like, it's like the cars, you work on them like you used to. Like what, like, it's like the way they're built now. You don't hang out and do that together anymore. Go back and do that again, guys. Get those classic cars and work together.
Exactly. Like maybe you can rob banks together, like in Point Break, like I was
or kiss a little like my own Private Idaho.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
Broke
what we're
back
talking
that mountain. About. Go back and be lovers and friends, guys.
Yeah.
Find your friends.
Yeah. Rachel and I talk about sometimes like, can masculinity exist without toxic masculinity? And can it exist now without that? And I read this book recently called For the Love of Men by Liz Plank. And it's just really, really interesting about, and I'm not going to defend men because I feel like they are not our primary victims right now, but it is interesting. It's like, what are we telling them they're supposed to be, and how limited do they feel? And if they feel limited and there's only one direction for them to go in, then why is it the alt-right, and why have we ended up there? And again, not saying they should be our priority right now, but I think given how much power they have, that needs to be something we consider. And so that's something I've really enjoyed. And like, if you go back to some of these Charles Bronson movies, it's just a different kind of masculinity, it's a lot more like sensitive and contemplative. And like in Death Wish, that's such an interesting movie. Like, he's really wrestling with what it means to kill somebody and what it means to lose somebody to like sexual violence. And so it's just, it was a lot deeper than I was expecting. I was expecting like a shoot 'em up movie. I was expecting what Death Wish 3 is.
Yeah, you got that too, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you switch over from podcasting to writing? Was it really just through Michael Rothman and he's saying pitch whatever you want?
It kind of was. And I mean, I pitched him it took me a while to figure out how to do it and how to kind of write about new releases or things. Like, there's a lot more skill to it than I thought. I thought at first it was just like, well, I'm saying things on a podcast. What if I just write those things down? And I do think there's a lot of overlap between writing and podcasting. Like, you're talking, you're sharing your feelings, and a lot of the podcasting that I do is more about analysis and interpretation than it is like historical stuff or like production. That's just not that's great. I'm very interested in that, but it's not something that I am particularly that good at. And so I think there were just things like I wanted to cover or I wanted to talk about, but I didn't have an episode coming up on it and I wasn't going to be able to, or like it was a new release movie. And I find like the writing, like it's just really, it really feeds my OCD too, because like I can edit myself, I can get all of my feelings out on the paper, and then I can start to shape them and start to refine them. And so I think that my writing has improved, my podcasting has improved, my writing has improved. So it's just, it's interesting. You start refining your thoughts and you start thinking, what is it that I actually want to say? And am I saying it effectively? And so it's kind of been an interesting journey that has run really parallel to it. The very first thing I ever wrote was an email to the Stephen King cast, which I don't know if y'all have ever listened to that, but Constant Reader, he's very mysterious. He doesn't reveal his name, but that was the first podcast I ever listened to. And I was like, well, Stephen King, I'm going to listen to something about Stephen King. And so I just started writing him letters based on something he said. And some of those turned into essays that I would later publish. But so it's about kind of wanting to have a conversation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was like, well, he said something that I kind of agree with, but I want to explore it more, you know?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I did write him a letter and tell him that too. So he's like kind of fangirled out over him. But he had said something about Harold Lauder, who's like one of my like favorite characters.
Yeah, me too.
So fascinating. And, you know, I was like, I have some thoughts about this, you know?
And now, you know, many people have listened to your thoughts on that, and that's pretty damn cool. So we have some questions that we want to ask at the end of this as we're wrapping up here. One of them is, if you had to recommend a film to someone who had never seen a horror movie before ever, which would you choose?
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I love finding somebody's Stephen King or horror movie thing. Like I love to find their entryway. I usually ask, tell me something that's not horror that you like, you know, because then I can try to pair it with a horrific version or like something that skews a little towards horror.
Could you recommend a Stephen King one for Terry?
I know. I was like, I want to play this game. Okay, great.
Let's do it.
So my favorite a movie musical of all time, because I'm a musicalaholic, is Singing in the Rain.
Same. Oh,
okay.
Love it.
I love like, you know, that era as well too. I love, you know, like Fred and Ginger, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's my other genre thing. Any other questions you have? What else do you want to know?
Well, based on that, I'm going to recommend 11/22/63 because there is a very classic love story in that. It's a little more sci-fi than horror, but it is so good.
Matt Dinah just read it and loved it. My dad read it and loved it. I read it and loved it. I mean,
so good. It's one of my all-time favorites.
There you go. I've watched the series. I think I gave it to you, Julia, that I had. Yeah.
The book is better, I think. I mean, that's normally
amazing.
Well, tell me a movie you like, and I'll find another Stephen King.
Okay. Oh gosh.
This is so much fun. I love
this is fun. What type of movie? Any genre movie?
Yeah, any favorite movie, just off the top of your head.
Oh gosh. Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. So any Wes Anderson, essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is Revival. I don't know if that totally fits, but it would be.
Mine was Survivor Type. I was like, well,
Survivor Type, yeah.
Like, I can't think of anything on a boat, but we got like an island.
Yeah. Do McKee, maybe? That would be cool. Yeah. That one's kind of a deep cut. Like that's like hard.
It's like we have a podcast about it or something, you know, right?
Just like firing on the same. No. Y'all unstoppable.
I think if I were to recommend,
y'all are.
I mean, sometimes I underestimate like how much I actually know, and I get like I start talking about stuff that nobody's ever heard of. You know,
that's the good stuff.
Exactly.
I have recommended The Long Walk to thousands of people by this point, and
I recommended The Long Walk the other day because they were talking about that new Hunger Games book, and I was like, y'all should read The Long Walk.
Yeah. And then we have the Hunger Games kind of crossover, right? Because Francis Lawrence directed The Long Walk, so we'll see how that goes. But speaking of directors, we do the Horror X in collaboration with the George A. Romero Foundation, so we have to ask what we ask all of our guests: how has George Romero made an impact on your life?
Oh, he convinced me to like zombie movies. For
You
a
didn't
long time,
before?
I didn't. That has never been my thing. I think
Ooh,
it taps a little of my OCD. Like it's just the bodies, they
they're
feel
too messy.
gross. It's too messy. Yeah.
And
And
it's a
I
bunch of
think
scars.
it is a bunch of scars and skin falling off and like eating
Mhm.
people. Now I'm like obsessed with cannibalism, but like it was very messy at the time. But like I think I like in my 90s horror loving, slasher loving, like kind
Yeah.
of Jen, I was like, zombie movies not really for me. I liked 28 Days Later because of Cillian Murphy.
Hello.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I watched Night of the Living Dead that I was like, oh, it's not about the zombies, it's about everybody else. And
Correct.
so I just love the stories, and what we become when we're threatened by monsters. And I think, Dawn of the Dead also. And so since then, like since watching those, I've gone back and watched a lot of them, and I've started to really appreciate the gore there because it's not just senseless. It means something. And what does it mean to consume other people and be consumed and turn into a monster? Like this is kind of a dumber one, but I am interested in Warm Bodies,
Mhm.
We
Yeah, we did
love
an
Warm
episode on
Bodies.
it. Nicholas Holt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
always
He's
killing it.
super
It's
dreamy.
Romeo and Juliet.
It
We're never going to be mad
is.
about a Shakespeare adaptation. Come on now.
Yeah.
Well, and like, can you come back from that? Like,
Yeah.
can you lose yourself in this virus and ever be a normal human again? So I think he really sold that to me. And before I was like, zombies, no, thank you. Walking Dead, no, I'm good. And then it wasn't until, and I watched Night of the Living Dead pretty late. I didn't grow up watching it. And so I was like, okay, this is another avenue of discovering humanity through horror
Look
that
at
I
that,
can
George.
get
I
into.
love that.
Changing lives,
Exactly.
as always.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you excited for 28 Years Later? Because I'm
Yes,
excited.
because I'll tell you one reason I'm excited about that is Aaron Taylor Johnson. Because
Same!
Julia's also
Same!
excited for a similar reason.
Yes.
Might have been why she was excited about Nosferatu as well. I understand.
Exactly. Yeah, I would
Um,
even watch that Craven movie because I think
I
it's hot. Although
did.
I heard that was bad.
I went there. It was me and one other dude in the theater, and the other dude left halfway through.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then it was just me.
Well, hey, that sounds like a
I'm
dream
sorry.
afternoon to me,
It was just me and Aaron Taylor Johnson in that last shot, and I was like,
Aw,
"Woof,
you had a
damn."
date. That's so
He's
cute.
so cute. I love him. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. And I do think 28 Days Later is my favorite zombie movie. What's funny is my parents went to see that thinking it was going to
Oh.
be like Contagion. And like my mom does not watch horror movies. She looks at me and she's like, "Where did you come from?" Because she doesn't, like the
Yeah.
last horror movie she probably watched was 28 Days Later and then Halloween when she was pregnant with me, which is why she says I like horror movies.
Oh, okay, that's what did it.
But
It's John Carpenter's
yeah,
fault.
exactly. Yeah. But she walked out of that being like, "Oh, what did I just watch?"
Wow.
But,
Yeah, that would be
so-
pretty intense for someone who doesn't like horror.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a
It's-
lot of movie.
It is a lot of movie. Yeah. I
Oh.
kind of am surprised she made it all the way through.
Impressive.
Yeah.
All right. Well, can you give us some plugs or tell the people where they can find you? All these shows, they need to know like a rundown. I mean,
Yes.
obviously your link tree is a good place to start because you got a lot on there, but
Yeah.
let the people know.
Yes, you can find me at Jen Ferratu on social media, and I'll post everything there. So that's probably the first place to go. But you can find me on the Losers Club podcast talking about Stephen King. We're about to cover Never Flinch, which is his new book, and a whole bunch of other stuff too. I know, me too. It's a Holly book. And then you can find me
What's
at
the book? What is it? What kind of book is it?
Never Flinch. It's starring my girl Holly Gibney, and I am a Holly defender.
Got it. Okay,
I
thank
am not
you.
a Holly
Yeah,
fan.
Julia's not a Holly fan,
Okay,
so
She's fine. Although she won me over a little bit in Holly.
she gets
So,
better as
okay,
she goes
she's
along. I'm not
interesting.
necessarily a Holly and Mr. Mercedes fan, but
Okay,
I like her now. So I'm excited about that.
It's just like speaking another language, right, Terry? You're just like, what?
You guys, no, it's a cult. It's adorable.
It
You guys are in the
could have
Stephen King cult, but I was like, oh, because one thing they said about cults is like if you have your own language that no one else outside understands. I was like,
Yep.
oh, perfect.
That,
They're doing the Stephen King chat.
the Losers
Perfect.
Club
I love it. I'm
language,
so
yeah.
glad you have these people though, Julia, because I
You have to
wish I
listen to
could
so
go
much
in.
of it.
I've listened to so much of it, but I
I'm
also am just like,
sorry.
I don't know what's going on.
Join us.
Ah.
And then the Lady Killers, and we're taking a little break right now, but we are going to be back in May with some really exciting episodes on some of my all-time favorites.
Ooh.
One that I can't say it yet, but I mentioned it in this conversation. So look out for that. And then Murder Made Fiction. I just said we're about to cover Elizabeth Bathory, which means we're going to be talking about Hostel 2, which I have not seen yet. So I'm excited for that.
Have
And
fun.
I know I'm a little nervous, but we're also going to be covering American Horror Story Hotel too, because there's a lot of serial killers in there based on true crime. And then The Girls on the Boys, like I just said, we finished talking about Man of Steel. So that's our episodes on Superman Returns and Man of Steel are going to be coming out soon. And we've got episodes on every episode of The Boys. So, you could start at the beginning and go through it on a rewatch or something.
Yes.
And then I have a column about female killers in horror called Fatal Femmes on Dread Central. And then
I was going in on that today, actually. Very good stuff. I was like, okay.
There's so much fun.
Yes, it's a great series.
Thank you. And then I write the Handmade Horrors column for Rue Morgue magazine, which is about like horror themed crafts. And then I just write a bunch of stuff on Bloody Disgusting, a lot about new releases and my various deep dives into like, I don't know, 1408 or Frozen or like Tremors or something that I am obsessed with. And they kindly let me obsess in words. So that's really fun. So, but if you follow me at Jim Ferratu, I'll post it all there.
I'm so glad that we got, because we get to talk about Stephen King a lot, which is delightful, but I don't get to talk about you a lot, right? And even when I met you once in person, I can't be like, so tell me about your life.
Exactly.
And now I can. I have an excuse.
This is your life. I know this is really our big long con to like get to know everyone even better, and hear you talk about all these things. I'm so delighted that we got to hang out. Even though Julia cheats on me all the time with you. I mean Julia does the other show with you all the time. I'm so grateful that she has you to geek out on about, and to talk about Ka or whatever, y'all.
She's the expert on Ka.
The wheel that goes on. And I'll bother you about Holly once I figure out what that is. Yeah. But I want to thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, you can listen to our podcast. Let's telling people to Horror Movie Survival Guide anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can hear Julie and I take deep dives every week into different horror films and dissect how you can survive and become the final girl.
And then, of course, you could catch me in my other podcast, Jodorowsky, all about Alejandro Jodorowsky, and The Losers Club, which Jen is also on. And we have been on many episodes together. Our last one was King's Best Kids.
Oh, yeah.
That was our
fun bracket
Madness bracket.
I love it when y'all do brackets. I don't know.
There's so much
y'all
fun.
y'all go in, and I those I appreciate because I feel like I always learn a little bit more on those too. So you can also check out the George A. Romero Foundation, please, which is dedicated to restoring Romero's work, including seldom seen pieces from his early career, like the amusement park, which we're always championing, and as well as keeping an archive and helping the next generation of young filmmakers out there. So thank you everyone for watching, and please do feel free to reach out to Julia or myself on the interwebs. We love to interact with people and get suggestions for films.
We do. And thank you to the George Romero Foundation for helping me, one of the young filmmakers. They helped support I Know What You Need by Stephen King.
A Stephen King adaptation? Oh my God. Look at that. I feel like I'm doing like a Charlie Day little chart over here. Okay.
It goes all the way to the top.
Oh, that's how it happened.
Top of the world, Ma. So we will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Here's hoping your days and nights are fantastic or cool.
Oh my gosh. Bye, guys. Yay. Yeah.